Well, hey, welcome to Mr. Frank's neighborhood. Still reading this book. Still look scared. Still a good book. I'm legitimately reading the book. When I say disturbing stuff, that is an understatement. I think the camera's there. Really messed up. Ugh. Ugh. That's cold. Not bad though. For cold coffee, not bad. Coffee's meant to be warm. All right, let's do it. Where we last left off, Korean War, Dunzo. We got a challenge today. Challenge for me, not for you. Challenge for me. Challenge for me is I have 3 things I want to talk about, possibly 4, in under 12 minutes. That's going to be tough. I've already wasted 50 seconds complaining about coffee, a book that you guys don't care about, and well, I guess those are the 2 things and currently what I'm doing. So let's get into it. Okay. Your essential question is, how did the election of Dwight David Eisenhower impact the Cold War? Okay. So what's kind of the other cool thing about the Cold War is, and the reason why I kind of do this, like, in my mind, like a story, is there are some elements of the Cold War that seem like just is not believable. And here's one of them. So as Truman is leaving the presidency in 1952, and Eisenhower becomes president, he doesn't officially take office until 1953. He's assuming the person he's going to be facing in the Cold War is Stalin. A few months after Eisenhower becomes president, Stalin dies. Honestly, that could be an entire video on its own. They made a movie on it called The Death of Stalin. It's a comedy because what happened in real life was a comedy. That when Stalin dies, like, you have Beria, who really big human garbage, Khrushchev and a couple other individuals who are all vying for to be the head of the Soviet Union, and all of them are stabbing each other in the back, making up lies, trying to manipulate other people, trying to figure out who's on whose side. In the end, Nikita Khrushchev is the individual who becomes the leader of the Soviet Union. I really short-sold what's one of the most interesting moments of the Cold War, but you really should check out The Death of Stalin and learn more about that, because it's comedic how there's points in time where, like, Beria is the first one to find Stalin dead. He doesn't report it for a few hours because he wants to make sure he's dead. So even people who were quote-unquote Stalin's allies hated this guy's guts. And it's so much so that when Khrushchev becomes the new leader of Russia, the general secretary, in 1953, by 1956, he begins a program called de-Stalinization, which is removing all remnants of Stalin from kind of the Soviet history, because it was pretty messed up stuff. Now, Khrushchev was not a good person either. He's not Stalin in terms of human garbage. He's slightly less human garbage, but Khrushchev isn't a good guy either. Khrushchev oversaw some of the purges of the 1930s, 1940s. Khrushchev was absolutely ruthless as well. Khrushchev knew how to manipulate other people. Like, Khrushchev himself kept around, I think it's like 4 million people in the gulags. So it's not like Khrushchev was a good guy either, but he did recognize some of the things Stalin was doing, the indiscriminate killing of anyone who stood against Stalin. Yeah, probably was not the best way to handle things. We could just throw them in jail for their entire life instead, and that's what Khrushchev tended to do. So on the Soviet scene, you have Khrushchev. On the American scene, you have Eisenhower. Now, one of the interesting things with Eisenhower is, of all American presidents, and almost every American president is pretty interesting, even looking your way, James Polk. I'm not going to put up a picture of him, so. But, is Eisenhower's one of, if not the most qualified person to ever be president. He was a general in World War II. Not only was he general, he was commander of all Allied forces in World War II. After that, he was in charge of NATO, the NATO organization. So his resume was very impressive. So much so that both Republicans and Democrats both wanted him to run for office for their political party. He ended up choosing the Republicans, even though he's pretty much a centrist in the middle. There's some differences between Truman and Eisenhower. Like, Eisenhower believed in the policy of containment, but he believed it didn't go far enough. So, here's the difference. Truman, containment, so let's just contain it. Eisenhower, something called rollback. Let's not just contain Soviet or communism. Let's actually push it back. Let's start to roll back the communist conquest throughout the world. And to do this, he had some different ways of going about it. One was nuclear deterrence. Hey, we have nuclear weapons. Let's use it as a threat. in the early 1950s, the Soviets still had atomic weapons. We developed nuclear weapons, something far more powerful than the atomic weapon. So we had a weapon superiority again. So Eisenhower said, let's use that to our advantage, and let's use that to basically threaten and deter other countries from going communist, or deter communist action throughout the world. So that's part of it. Another part of it was, hey, this is a war. We have to win. And so let's start using covert action. And so it's Eisenhower who allows, again, John Foster Dulles, to basically, head of the CIA, hey, do what you need to do. So during the Eisenhower years, we have a lot of different covert actions throughout the world. We have the United States getting involved heavily in Latin America to keep the communists out. One is Arbenz, Suez Canal, Lebanon. The Arbenz one's interesting because it involves the banana company, which is kind of interesting. But the big thing that Eisenhower's doing is, let's not just contain it, let's actually fight it. Let's actually roll this thing back, and let's use covert action and the CIA and intelligence to do so. He wanted to do that because, believe it or not, even though Eisenhower was a military guy, he wanted to be cost effective. Having large numbers of troops, large numbers of tanks, planes, things like that is going to cost a lot of money. And one of the other things Eisenhower wanted to do that he believed was a key part of national security, and he's right on this, is having a really strong economy. If your economy is really strong, your military is going to be really strong because you can pay for great technologies, you can innovate. And so to not spend too much money on the military, Eisenhower's plan was, if we can balance having less actual military personnel with having more of a nuclear stockpile and using covert actions, which two things that cost a lot less money, that'll help even the playing field. So that's what's kind of going on during the Eisenhower administration. Now, everything looks really good, except for 1957. In 1957, the Soviets launch Sputnik. That's the first satellite, and all of a sudden everyone starts panicking. We thought for years we were so far ahead of the Soviets technologically, the fact that they could spy on us from space changes the game. And this idea called a missiles gap begins to come around, and it's not entirely true, but now we're looking at these situations as, well, maybe we were wrong in terms of where we invest our money in terms of the nuclear weapons and covert action. We should have been investing it in this other place. So 57 is kind of this watershed mark in the Cold War where it looks like, man, maybe we're losing this thing. What else is going on in the 1950s, though, is a lot of these communist countries, with the backing of the US CIA, they're rebelling against the Soviets. And in the prime place this takes place is Hungary. And this is kind of one of those examples of the Cold War getting hot, but it's still the Cold War, where in Hungary, the CIA spends a ton of money and influence with rebel groups in Hungary trying to overthrow the Soviets. So much so that they end up taking control of the government. And the Soviets, and Khrushchev's left for this choice, what do we do? And what he does is what any Soviet dictator would do, is he rolls in there with tanks and the Red Army and puts down the rebellion. And the rebels in Hungary kind of look back at the United States and say, well, what do we do? That you kind of helped spark the flames and feed this rebellion. Where are you guys to help? And the Eisenhower administration kind of said, well, we're not going to go that far. We can debate whether that was the right move, but the rationale certainly was that Hungary is not the place where we're actually starting World War III. That, hey, the Soviets went there with the Red Army. We're not willing to do as much because we're not willing to sacrifice the world, basically, for Hungary. But that's the 1950s. You see the Eisenhower administration and the CIA throughout the world causing a lot of headaches for the Soviet Union, which is something the Soviets traditionally had been doing to us in westernized countries. And so the Eisenhower administration takes a lot more proactive and aggressive approach to combating communism throughout the world. During this time, obviously we're around the 9-minute mark. I'm doing pretty good so far. Also during this time, mid-1950s, a guy named Joe McCarthy. Joe McCarthy, senator from Wisconsin. McCarthyism is a part of the Cold War. Again, you can take entire college units and stuff on this, but McCarthy makes an accusation that there's a number of communist agents inside of the U.S. State and Treasury Department. McCarthy is not wrong. He is actually correct on this. However, he doesn't know he's actually right. He's just making up numbers. Ends up having a number of Senate hearings on this. The Senate Committee on House and American Affairs is founded. Some individuals were wrongfully accused. Many individuals, like Alger Hiss, certainly was rightfully accused. He went too far. And it's when he began accusing the U.S. military that Eisenhower finally said, okay, McCarthy, you're done. History books have written McCarthyism and McCarthy as a horrible, horrible person. It's more complex than that. McCarthy certainly had no idea that there were actually that many communist agents inside the Treasury and State Departments. However, he was right that there were. It's just that he didn't actually know that. He was just guessing on it. So that's part of this entire 1950s too. But in 1959, Eisenhower knows that in 1960 he will not be president anymore because his 2 terms are up. And in 1959, just to the south of the United States, a big headache's about to happen. Franco, not me, Cuban, Batista. No, it's Batista. It's Batista. It's Batista. My bad. Batista. Batista, the leader of Cuba and pro-American. He's overthrown in communist revolution by Fidel Castro. Somehow this happens underneath the noses of the United States. It's a complete embarrassment, especially to Eisenhower. And him and the CIA begin developing plans on taking back and invading the island of Cuba and ridding the communist threat from our doorstep. Because that was a huge problem. If the Soviets put nuclear weapons, foreshadowing, that will happen, on Cuba, that causes a huge security concern to Washington, D.C., to New York, and the entire East Coast. And so in 1959, after it's taken, Eisenhower begins planning an invasion of Cuba. He doesn't bother telling presidential candidate JFK because he doesn't believe JFK is going to win. He believes Nixon is going to win the White House. And so JFK, when he wins the election in 1960, has no idea the CIA has this large-scale invasion of Cuba planned. We call it today now the Bay of Pigs, but that's where we're going to end today. That the Eisenhower administration, some big takeaways here. Hey, it's kind of containment, but it's containment with some teeth. We're not just going to contain the Soviets, we're going to roll them back. That's a big change. Second big change, we're not going to rely on military so much in terms of personnel. We're going to rely instead on nuclear technology. Third thing, we're going to really put the CIA to work. We're going to start using covert action throughout the world. On the flip side, Soviet Union, Stalin's gone, Khrushchev's in charge, but there's not a huge change in terms of the Soviets and Khrushchev wanting to take over the world. Where we end is a new president is in place in JFK. He's given this Cuba problem. He's not quite sure what to do, but the first 3 years of his presidency are going to be dominated by 2 events in Cuba, one of which is the closest we ever came to actually World War III, and not just military World War III. We're talking about full-out nuclear war. One question, real quick. I can't think of any questions. Skylar, that's actually the best question here. So, you guys, good rest of your day. Remember, do some push-ups, for sure. Like, great exercise, for sure. Do some bodyweight squats. Don't forget the legs. Do some core. Always a good thing. Remember, believe in yourself. Believe in this country. Believe in coffee. Believe in reading books. Believe in mustaches. Believe in Tom Selleck. Still cold. Believe in 80s action movies. They're the best. Watch them. Let me know what ones you like. Woo! Let's do this.